Um, let's talk a bit about the Broadway musicals before we hook back to the end of the off-Broadway stuff. But what was your first Broadway book?
For a musical?
Yeah.
Well, I left the show in Philadelphia. It was called Here's Where I Belong. It's a musical of all things, East of Eden, which really is unsuitable material, I think, for a musical. But I thought it would make John Steinbeck happy if I did it. And I think the producer and the composer and lyricist thought I was like a connection to John. All we did was really get John to come to the opening night, I think, which I didn't attend, and it was the one and only performance of the show in New York. We did the show in Philadelphia, and it was a mess. No one involved with the show had ever done a musical. The producer, the book writer, the composer, the lyricist, the cast. Paul Rogers, who had just won a Tony for The Homecoming, was playing the father, was the star. He'd never been in a musical. It was just a lot of neophytes, and we just absolutely disagreed about everything that was wrong about the show and should be addressed while we spent the 3 weeks in Philadelphia, quote, fixing it. So Hanya Holm, who choreographed My Fair Lady, and I found ourselves in agreement on every point. So the two of us said we think it's probably appropriate that we leave, and we got on the train together, and I remember coming back with talking to the legendary choreographer of My Fair Lady, and the music, she knew the music man. And it was just, when everything is against, you want to go this way, and everybody wants to go that way. And I said, I'm not going to go see a preview, I'll wait and see the second or third night. And Jimmy Coco was in it, and he said, you better come to a preview, I don't think it's going to be a second performance. I said, oh, Jimmy. And I remember he packed his makeup kit up opening night, and everybody was so upset with him. Jimmy, what are you doing? There's not going to be a second performance. And I think they really were mad at him for showing so little confidence in the show. They worked so hard on him. Jimmy was right, because actors have said that's really humiliating. To leave the theater, good night, and then you're back the next day clearing out your dressing table. Jimmy said, I told him he didn't have to go back up to the theater. So I never saw it. I don't know what changes they made.
But then you had The Rink in '84.
The Rink was the first musical that I opened with my name on it. And The Rink is an interesting story. Phone rings, and this is John Kander. Hi, on the other line, this is Fred Ebb. Certainly knew who they were. And they said, we have this show we like. We think we've written some really good songs for. And we're very unhappy with the book. And I said, yeah. Well, what we'd like to do is you come up here and let us play the 10 songs we have for you and see if they suggest some sort of plot to your story. She said, okay. So I got in the subway, went up, heard the songs, and I'd say all but maybe one or two were in the show as it opened. But when you hear a song like The Rink, Here We Go Round the Rink, clearly it takes place in a rolling skating rink. Clearly the emphasis of the story is mother-daughter generational conflict. But I came up with a plot pretty quickly that they liked. But I said to myself, I think the best musicals get written together, not connect the dots. So I said, never again will I work on a musical that the score pre-exists the book. They should happen together, or the book should be mother, father to the parent to the lyrics and music. But I still enjoyed the experience. And Cheetah, the legendary Cheetah, I mean, my God, Maria and West Side Story, so I'm like, I can't believe this. And at the very last minute, somehow, suddenly, Liza Minnelli was in it, and I was like, I can't believe this. And, oh God, J.D. Antune, one of the very first, of going to have a brilliant career in the theater, first AIDS victim I knew personally, but none of us knew he was sick. He would just disappear a lot. Where's AJ? He'll be back in an hour. And then suddenly he just was gone. It was really early. I don't even know the word. They weren't even calling it AIDS. It was gay cancer, the immune, that long name they had originally. But that was the beginning. I mean, the toll AIDS took on the theater community was staggering, and AJ was, I think, maybe the first person of great note to succumb to it. But I learned a lot on that. I mean, I always learned from shows. Cheetah, it was like you learn, there's no substitute for great technique. Cheetah hits the bullseye 8 shows a week. Liza's totally improvisatory and still hits the bullseye. At the last second, the arrow lands where she wants it to land. And I learned so much. I used to stand in the back of the theater and watch them, what I could learn as a writer, the discipline of the one and the generosity of the other. And I said, well, I was saying to myself, who are you saving it for? Liza gives it away every performance, or did, I mean, many years ago. I thought she was one of the most staggeringly, abundantly, naturally gifted people I've ever had the pleasure of being in the same room with. And Cheetah was one of the most abundantly, and still is, just did the visit with her 3 years ago. The technique, it's just, but it's all technique, and it doesn't mean it's not heartfelt, but it's craftsmanship. Liza, it's not craftsmanship, but she has that instinct to land on her feet, you know. And theater is the balance between, the tension between those two. Be free, wild, go places you've never dared go, but know you're going to end up on your feet. You owe that to yourself and the audience and your collaborators. And I think of both those women, how much they taught me working on that strange show, which I liked. The book, I got hammered for it a lot. But having Liza, who was at Studio 54 every night playing an anti-war activist, was probably not the best casting in the world. She had speeches, you know, about the war in Vietnam and things like that. And I don't think that was too convincing to an older audience, and the critics were buying. But maybe, I don't know, it's being done, getting a big revival in London next year. So
Okay.
we'll see.
Then you went on to do the Kiss of the Spider Woman with Cheetah.
Just Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Kiss of the Spider. Again, they all begin with phone calls. This is Hal Prince. I'm thinking, I want to make a musical with John and Fred, who are with me in the office, of Kiss of it. My mind went, I hope he's going to say of the Spider Woman, because I thought to make it. Didn't hesitate for a second what a great musical that would make. And he said, of the Spider Woman. I said, yeah, great. Let me reread it and look at the movie again. And so I just thought, and most of my friends, what are you, insane? That's a terrible idea for her. In fact, most of the musicals I've done, people thought were bad ideas, like The Visit, and certainly people thought A Ragtime was a terrible idea for a musical. But I thought, I would have thought Pygmalion was a terrible idea for a musical, so I would have said no to that offer. So everybody hears music in different things, places and voices. So, but musicals, they humble me, and after Anastasia, I put my sign back up, no more musicals. They're humbling. They're just, I don't think anyone really knows how to do them, and it's kind of luck, and they all come together, or they don't, and usually they don't. And there's so many bright people working on musicals, but just so many people involved with every decision. And a play, you know, I can say, if you see a play of mine, I wrote it. When you see a musical, my name is on it, and I wrote every line of dialogue. But I didn't do that dance. I didn't write that song. I didn't do that bit of orchestration. And maybe that's not the orchestration I thought was right for that moment. So it's hard to say you're trying to make it look like one person, but to get 6 or 7 people singing one voice is hard. And on My Fair Lady, it worked. It sounded like one person put it all together, including George Bernard Shaw. And does him proud. It does Lerner and Lowe proud. It does Moss Hart proud. It does everybody proud. But they are probably the defining American art form, and I see why people are drawn to them. And then, every show that I've sort of been, no one has ever asked me to write a play, but I've been asked to write musicals. The ones I've said yes to, there's always been a story involved, and like Spider-Woman was a chance to work with Hal Prince, the legend, my God. Anastasia was commissioned by a Russian producer. We're going to have the world premiere in Moscow. And I thought, how thrilling to live in Russia, the land of Chekhov and Stanislavski for half a year, and create a new American musical there. And we did it, and suddenly Broadway producers said, they sort of said, this show is too good for Moscow. We're going to try it out here first. So now it's going to go to Moscow like in 2 years from now. And everyone I've spoken to said, you dodged a very big bullet, not working in Moscow on a new American musical. That technologically they are several years behind us. And they don't know transitions. It's like curtain falls, hammering from backstage for 2 minutes, the curtain goes up on a new set. Things that we just don't do anymore. And then the climate in Russia, I think, has changed quite a bit too. People have been there and said the overt anti-Semitism and homophobia is shocking to an American. Shocking. So maybe it would have been a miserable 6 months there. But that's why originally what drew me to, I still love to travel.
You talk a little bit about Ragtime.
Ragtime, someone called, I have the rights to Ragtime. Yes, I'm sure I want to do it. Let me reread the book, that's a book you can read in one night, really. And I thought the only problem with Ragtime is how to keep it from being 30 hours long, because every scene, every line in that book sings to me. You could write a scene here, a song there, So it's just whittling it down and giving it theater shape as opposed to. And I deliberately did not see the movie, which I knew was not well received. And I remember Dr. O on talk shows bewailing the movie of his book, that he ruined it, blah, blah. So I said, I'm never going to watch this movie. So I wrote a treatment of it it's almost 60 pages long, which was, this is how I see it. You begin to do the end. And we gave it to Dr. O, and he approved it. And I said, because I'm going to write the show. You can come to Toronto for the first preview, but we're not co-writing the show. If you don't like it now, say, this is not the way I want the story told, fine, I will withdraw. No one had earned a penny or been paid, we just on spec. And he said, okay. And he came up to the preview. In Toronto, he had notes and thoughts, things he liked, things he didn't like. But he didn't write it. All right, so they said, who do you want to compose it now? I said, let's get a director. And the producer had just seen Grapes of Wrath. And everybody was like, where's Frank Galati been all our lives? And I thought, what a perfect choice. Didn't even have to meet him. So we offered it to Frank, and he read the treatment and said yes. But again, who's the composer going to be? So I said, I auditioned for this job. Yeah? Well, why don't we get composer and lyricists to audition? What do you mean? Give them my treatment. Say, see if this inspires any music in you. Write a song or 5, whatever you want, ideally 3 or 4. Put them on a cassette, unmarked, and let us listen. I got the idea totally from the way the New York Philharmonic was starting to audition musicians behind a curtain. So if it's a young or old man or woman, ethnicity, you know nothing about this person except the way they play the violin. So we sent the script to, I think, the treatment to 11 all known, you've heard of everyone on the list, and 5 were insulted and said, go fuck yourself. I have 3 Tony Awards, and 6, I think, there were 6 tapes arrived, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We listened to the songs separately. The producer here, Dr. there, Frank in Chicago, me here in his apartment. No, I was living on 22nd Street then. And I called and I said, I will only consider working with whoever wrote the songs for tape 3. Dr. said, the only songs that remotely sound like what I could imagine being on tape 3. Frank Galati, because we'd known who the names were. You're going to listen to a score by Leonard Bernstein differently than a score by Mary Jones. And I think it's a smart way to find the right composer, because you're not invested in their credits. And I had a pretty unsuccessful musical, which again, I didn't take my name off it, but I parted company with it in Seattle, Catch Me If You Can. It was put together together we have 85 Tony Awards. That doesn't mean we were the right 6 people to translate that material to the stage. So I think it's such a smart way to find people. So we could have been turning down Leonard Bernstein or George Gershwin and instead hiring Mary Brown, but Mary Brown wrote the best music and lyrics for this show. We opened it, who wrote tape 3, and Lynn and Stephen, who I had seen Lucky Stiff, which I thought was talented, and Once on This Island, which I thought was amazing, and loved it. So I was thrilled it was them. And it's in my archives in Austin, not to be opened. The tapes are there, my copies and the names of the other people, but they're all, you turned down, he could have written, she could have written. And that's a true story, and I think it's a very sensible way to do musicals. That's not how things are getting produced anymore. It's a package, Whoever has the most Tonys gets the job, and it's not good producing.
The Full Monty.
That, I hadn't seen the movie, and Jack O'Brien called and said, look, this is really simple. You either want to do it or you don't. See the movie, but I can do it at my theater, so there's no problem about raising millions of dollars to do it at the Old Globe. I watched the movie and I said, Jack, the movie's not in English. I don't know what they're saying. I can't understand it. Can we get the screenplay? So I've watched it a few times with the script. I said, all right, I'll do it, but it's got to be in America, and there's got to be a woman piano player, because otherwise, in the movie, they put on records and rehearsed to records. I said, that's not going to be fun. So I created the character, the old lady. And I wrote the show in, I swear, it felt like 3 weeks. I'm sure it wasn't. And just came together. And when it opened on Broadway, less than a year later was 95% what we did in San Diego, which is one of those. Cast never changed, just a happy show. Jerry Mitchell was the choreographer. The only change on it was David Yazbek, was someone I'd never worked with, because there was no composer involved. And Adam Gettle was going to compose it. And we sort of got nowhere after a month or so, and he said, just not happening for me. He said, I have a friend. His name is David Yazbek, and here's his CD. And that's not my world, punk rock, whatever David did then with his band, but the sounds and the lyrics were extraordinary. And I said, I don't care, he's never done a Broadway show. He's the real deal. And these are theater lyrics. And David wrote a brilliant score, I thought. Now, I'd say he considers himself a theater. He still does his band at Joe's Pub, but that was just a great, happy choice. And that's, again, people said, Joe Mantello's never directed on Broadway. David Yazbek's never written a Broadway show. Someone has to give you your first chance. Mm-hmm. or we'd all be dead. I'd be the only living American playwright. And I've got enough people nipping at my ass as it is. I've been nipped. So you need, producers with some courage and imagination. And theater is always a leap of faith. I mean, I don't care if it's Marlon Brando. He could give a bad performance, maybe. No guarantee. Because he's Marlon Brando, he's going to be Stanley Kowalski again, or The Godfather. So I think producers have gotten more timid than they used to be, and I know a lot of it is because of the enormous expense. But there's still fearless people out there. I mean, the past 2 years, both The Humans and Doll's House Part 2 were by relatively young, unknown playwrights, opened cold on Broadway, without, quote, stars. They're very successful, so it still happens, just harder. It's a real news story, whereas when I started, there were 5 or 6 new American plays by unknown writers without stars on Broadway a year. Which said, people like Eileen Heckert was not a star. She was known, but not, it's not the Bette Midler and Hello Dolly, which is, at the moment, that seems to be what our theater is most enraptured of. Bruce Springsteen's solo, Bette and Hello Dolly. And that's a dead end, So we need producers who are going to have vision, look to the future, like the people were in what we're meant to be talking about off Broadway. So it really hasn't changed what we're talking about. Who's going to bring in the new people? And I mean, one of the unsung heroes of the American theater to me is Robert Redford, who was on Broadway, I think, once in his life, maybe twice. His Sundance Institute, they bring about 8 to 10 playwrights out there every year. That's where Frankie and Johnny began. Kathy Bates and I developed a relationship there. He never gets credit for running this place. People hear about the Sundance Film Institute, but he's developed a lot of good theater at that place. And Edward Albee, was raking in some big bucks with Virginia Woolf and those shows, and he put it back into helping the next generation of writers. And not many successful playwrights have done that. And I do believe in giving back, and I wish more people did. I'll say it that bluntly, because you got to help the next generation, or welcome them to the theater, not get away, And sometimes you do feel there's not much room on the life raft, the lifeboat. Get away, get away. But we gotta. It'll hold us. We gotta let the new people on.
You did another play with Lynn and Stephen, A Man of No Importance, going back to off-Broadway, and you were...
That was the only musical whose idea was mine. It was a cold and rainy night when I was living in Chelsea, and it was sort of like the beginning of Frankie and Johnny. A lot of single men and women checking out lots of movies to watch, because they clearly were not going to get hooked up with anybody over the next 48 hours. And I just saw this movie there, 99 cents, Man of No Importance. I looked at the cast. Albert Finney and every great Irish character actor who ever lived was in it. I said, how bad can it be? And I just fell in love with it. And I said, what a great musical. And I called Lynn and Stephen and I said, I found our next project. Because after Ragtime, we were offered to do things together, but they're all huge, like Ragtime. They're like Exodus. A lot of the James Michener stuff. So I couldn't wait for them to watch this movie. And they called and said, we don't see it at all. Really? No, not at all. I said, okay. 2 years later, they called and said, we watched the movie again. If you can do what you did for Ragtime, just give us a first scene. How you open, we don't even know how we begin this show. Just give us a sequence. And I wrote the opening sequence where he gets out of bed, and, to the church. It's like a flashback. And then a day in his life as a bus conductor and the people who ride his line every day. And it was about 5 or 6 pages long, and sent it to them. They loved it and wrote the opening number. a man of no importance. Overnight, it seemed, and then the rest of the show got written very quickly. And the moral of that show is, people say critics don't matter anymore. It was such a smash at Lincoln Center. We had the Music Box Theater, full funding for the production, to open up, transferred right to Broadway. We're at the opening night party, and suddenly, what do you see, the Times? It was absolute dismissal of it. And the producers said, we believe in the show, we love in the show, but you open the show on Broadway because the press likes it. The band's Visit, David's new show, is not moving because it got bad reviews. It's moving because it got, so the critics do matter still to investors. Yeah. And that show just died at that party. We all went in such high spirits, and we all left thoroughly discouraged. But I continue to love that show. It gets done a lot in regional theaters and English-speaking countries. Whoever plays Alfie always wins Best Actor award in the community. It's a great role. Roger Rees was so great in it. And, you know, shows, if they're good, they have a life of their own beyond New York City, but it makes their way harder. No question, it's more difficult. The board of directors says, has this play ever been done before? Yeah, it was done in New York, but what did the press say? Well, you can't hide it anymore. They go on the internet, type in New York Times, man of no importance, and read the bad review. Can we stop for a second?
59 E59 theaters, primary stages, with the Stendhal syndrome.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit.
That's a theater I opened. I'm very excited about that. I mean, you know, I want to separate what's really interesting about a play and the gossipy stuff. And I think when you agreed to do that play, Frank Langella was going to create the role of the conductor. And then suddenly he got a movie 2 or 3 weeks before we were going into rehearsal. Richard Thomas, who did every workshop of Kiss of the Spider Woman, at the very last minute, he calls and says, I've been offered. Like, we didn't have a leading man. Brent Carver was his understudy, his cover. And he was so good that we went with Brent Carver, who won the Tony. Richard did every workshop of Man of No Importance. And 2 or 3 weeks before we did it for real, got a movie. Richard has 5 kids to take care of. It's a lot, I know. So you can't be mad at him when you're offering him well under $1,000 a week and they're offered a movie or a TV series. So Richard, who at the last minute had abandoned 2 shows of mine, I called him and said, the tables have been turned now. I'm going into rehearsal in 2 weeks. And Frank Langella just left. Will you do it? And he read it and said, yeah. And he was so good in it. I can't believe how good he was, because I guess like everybody, I still thought of him as John Boy. And he really went to some dark, angry, scary places in that play. And I love that production. And Isabella was, if I have a goddess in life, it's her mother. So, and she looks so much at times like, Mom, my God, I'm doing a play with Ingrid Bergman. And she's such a lovely, lovely person. Yeah. And we're good friends. We've become good friends in life. And she lives very happily in Bellport, in kind of a compound of her own creation, and lots of animals and children, and you never know who's going to wander in through the door. It's quite a unique space. But that was a wonderful experience. And that's one show I do remember people showing up with an 8-year-old child, and I felt like saying, I don't think this is an appropriate play really for a child that age. And I'm not big on children's theater. Children should only see Cinderella, Puss in Boots. I think they should see Ethel Merman and then Get Your Gun. But I don't think they should see Richard Thomas talking about Menage a Trois quite graphically. And they did get up halfway through and left with the child. I remember that. And I love that little theater. I remember nothing was sort of ready when we did it. You know,
Yeah.
it was just bathrooms and smell of paint. And then I was back there with Dedication.
Dedication
Or the
and
Stuff of
Nathan
Dreams. Nathan
and Marion.
Nathan and Marion, yeah.
And Nathan kind of came in at the last minute there too.
Well, you know, yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, we got a new director, and he said, I don't want anyone from the original cast. And the original cast was pretty wonderful. It was Boyd Gaines and Deborah Monk. You can't,
Mm-hmm.
they don't come better than that. So I had to call them. Marion, he would accept. So I called them and said, you know, we're going on without you. And how could, it's one thing when I did it when I was 20 years old. Now I'm in my 50s, say, and I'm doing this thing. And they didn't take that very well, I guess. Or, you know, it was very awkward seeing them. And then we couldn't find a man. And I called Nathan, and he said, I just got back from London doing, you know, a year of producers. I'm exhausted. Do you promise me you've asked every conceivable, and he would, did you ask so-and-so? Yes. So-and-so? Yes. You know. I said, all right, if they all have said no or unavailable, I'll do it. God damn you. And he did it. So, but he was not a happy camper during that production. That was not a fun production. Yeah, I said some shows just are sunny, even if they're about very dark things, and sometimes the most lightest of comedies, everybody's not in a good mood. And I don't know what it sets the zeitgeist of a production. It's probably the script somehow. I don't know, but that was not a. We replaced someone, if you remember, during rehearsals,
Yeah.
which is really awkward. It sets a tremor of insecurity through the entire company. It's just not nice, and it was difficult. And,
But it had some great theatrical flourishes,
Oh.
moments, and Marion was terrific on it.
I was proud of it, but just wasn't fun.
Yeah.
You know, Masterclass was. Oh no, that wasn't always fun. Theater's hard work. I can think of a horror story in almost every show, except the ones I've said were really like the Full Monty was fun always. Ragtime was always a joy. Ragtime brings out the best in people because of what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and some shows are too. I don't know, but.
Some Men at Second Stage.
Yeah. That play came out of Sundance. That's where I workshopped it. And we did it in Philadelphia. And I was sitting there, and at the last performance I said, why are all these women in a play called Some Men? It's about gay men, not about their friendships with straight women or iconic. You know, there was musical numbers that were sort of tributes to famous women singers, I guess, numbers identified with. So I got rid of them and did a 99% rewrite. And the producer at Second Stage, Carol Rothman, kept her word and, you know, still did it, despite some pretty rough reviews in Philadelphia. And by the time we got it to her theater a year later, I was really proud of it. I think it's one of my best plays for what it is. It's a chronicle of gay life for men, but women are included in it. They're all stage characters. They're talked about in a way that they weren't in Corpus Christi. But I thought it was a really good example of that genre of seeing 12 people at a wedding. What stories connect them? You know, it's kind of a riff on that. When the curtain went up, you know, they're all facing at a wedding listening to the vows. And why these men all have some relationship to one another, which they're not even aware of. And I just was very proud of it. So it was beautifully acted. directed. John Glover, someone I've written for several times. He's going to be in my new play. I wrote the role of John James for him in Love, Valor. I certainly did not write the role of Buzz for Nathan. Didn't remotely think Nathan would. Wasn't even thinking of him. I know the actor I was thinking of. We did a reading of it, and he was like, "Oh my God, how could I have so misjudged his suitability for this role?" Unfortunately, he got another better-paying job, and he was sort of like, he sort of apologized to me. I've got to take the bigger gig, and so we didn't have that painful phone call where we're moving on without you. He sort of left me. He Frank Langella'd me, you know. So, but you know, sometimes you think you're writing well for someone, and you know, certainly every word of Masterclass was written for Zoe Caldwell, and she turned it down originally, and I didn't know what am I going to do. She said, you know, I don't want to do a one-woman show. I said, it's not a one-woman show. Well, it looks like it. There's too many lines, and I don't like opera. I've never heard of any of these people. No. Then she reread it, or I don't know what persuaded her. Then we went and did it. I said, so I have a chance to do the play, one performance only, in a town called Big Fork, Montana. They're doing a New Works Festival for 4 nights. And I forget some of the other playwrights, but you've heard of them. So we all slept out there, rehearsed for 4 or 5 days. And we read, we didn't perform, we read Masterclass. And it worked, even unrehearsed. Zoe was the only equity person in the play. Everybody else, I think, lived in Montana somehow. And when it was over, we did question and answer. And one of the first questions was Maria Callas a real person? And I said, yes. I told you she was a real person. Then another, yes. This is from Miss Caldwell. Are you a professional actress? She said, yes. You're very good. Thank you. Meaning, you know, maybe even at your age, you might get a television series, and I will have heard of you, but right now you're nobody, but you're awfully good. So I said, Zoe, if the play is working in this town hall, wherever it was, like a 2-hour drive to the nearest airport, I think we have a shot with it. And we did it.
The Golden Age at City Center.
Yeah, that was my return to Manhattan Theater Club.
Uh-huh.
So again, I'm going Broadway, off Broadway, Broadway, off Broadway. And Broadway, off. One of those, somewhere in there, there's a couple of off-offs, I think. That was my, you know, let's work together again on a play that I loved. I don't think it came together with the right components.
It had been at Washington. I think I saw it at Washington.
My dream is it will be done again one day.
Yeah.
With a whole different look and cast and everything. And we did it in Washington. Yeah, and it was part of a Kennedy Center did a festival of my work. Mm-hmm. And they wanted 2 old plays in a world premiere, I guess. And they had the world premiere of it in the Manhattan Theater Club.
And were they doing ragtime at that time as well?
No.
As part of that?
That was separate.
No, that was the separate.
That was just a musical.
Yeah.
And that production came back. That was a revival of ragtime.
Right.
That came to Broadway. It was very well reviewed, and it was a very good production. I
Beautiful
thought.
production.
Yeah.
And away we go.
Well, that's like off Broadway, the Pearl Theater Company. I just loved their mission. And they said, would you write a play for us? And I said, sure. And, you know, and out of that, I mean, I had a wonderful time on that play. I love that play. Again, you know, sometimes why a play you like so much and thinks gives real pleasure to people, why it's not, you know, received more warmly, frankly. And I thought that play should have run much longer. But it did. But Micah Stock, this young, wonderful actor, who had such a success in a Tony Award nomination, and it's only a play, he showed up at an open call. You know, it's still how you get a job as a young actor.
You show up and audition. No one had, he never, it was his first job in New York, and right away he went into, well, he had Jack and Nathan both came to see the play, liked him, but he still came in and gave a proper audition for the part of Gus, and it's only a play, but he showed up at an open call, just remarkable, wonderful. But that play was, my speed course, the history of theater, it began at the performance of Agamemnon in Greece, and the last scenes were during intermission of Godot at the Coconut Grove Playhouse with irate audience people. What the hell is going on here? This play's terrible. Bring back Harvey. And I had a lot of fun writing that play.
What is Fire and Air you're working on now?
Fire and Air is about Diaghilev in Les Ballets Russes, and the main characters are Nijinsky, Leonid Massine, who replaced him after he was fired from the company, Missia Sert, who was a great patron of the arts, Dima, who was Diaghilev's older first cousin, best friend, and Dunya. It's not research, but I've read a little about Diaghilev. He was given at birth a nanny, and not how long she stayed with him. But there's a famous portrait of him by Bakst, and in the corner there's a little woman all in black, ready to bring him his tea or, darn his socks. But so she was with him quite late in life, and I imagined their relationship. So it's a 6-character, but started out with maybe 18 characters. Just about it'll be a year ago this February. We read the first draft, sitting right here, and it just was too crowded with people. And I thought if one more person says, "Oh, Monsieur Stravinsky, have you met Monsieur Picasso?" I said, "Oh, save it for comic booker." So they mentioned some of them in passing, but they're not characters, and it just became a cavalcade of 20th century avant-garde artists. But Diaghilev did sort of create modern art as we know it. And I guess this play is my tribute to producers or the people who make it happen. He had no talent. He wanted to be a composer. Studied with Rimsky-Korsakov, and after 2 years, Rimsky-Korsakov, who was the most famous composer in Russia, it would be like you start with Leonard Bernstein and said, "I can't at all conscious take any more money from you. You're not a good composer." And then he tried to be an art critic, and then he suddenly fell in love with the ballet at a performance of what was considered a modern ballet then, Petrushka. And he heard Stravinsky's music, which was not as revolutionary as Rite of Spring, but pretty, wow, this is not Rimsky-Korsakov's. So, sort of my tribute to him. And I'm also aware at 79 how many plays I've left, what I want to write about. There was a long period I thought a masterclass was my last play, because it felt very autumnal and valedictory to me. And I'm so glad I didn't stop. I've written 4 or 5, or I don't know how many plays since. But I felt I sort of said what I want to say. And but right now I have two plays percolating I'm very excited about. But the percolation is not fingers on keyboard. We'll see. But I still have my enthusiasm for theater. It's the stamina part that is... It's hard work, theater, and when you're young, you just have more stamina, and 6 flights of stairs are nothing. 8 shows a week are nothing, And the only actors I know who don't get tired doing 8 shows a week are Cheetah and Nathan. And, they're older than most of their co-stars who are always... You go backstage at these shows and you go, "Oh, God, 3 shows." And there's Cheetah, like, "Let's do the 5th show," They're ready to go on. I like Energizer bunnies to write for, because I've got a little of that left in me, I guess.
Just a couple other things. You talked about off. Did you have you had some shows at La Mama or moments at Cafe
The
Chino?
only thing I had at La Mama
No.
was Julie.
Was that reading?
And the only thing I never had anything at Chino.
Chino, yeah.
I went to them a lot. I knew everybody, but I was getting produced more commercially than a lot of my friends were.
Right.
I mean, I was always the one who was getting reviewed in the New York Times, and wasn't deliberate. Just how my career took out. I mean, certainly didn't feel superior or more evolved as a playwright, and I envy any playwright who has a good relationship with the theater. Joe Chino had a wonderful rapport with, say, Lanford, for example, and I had a great rapport with Manhattan Theater Club, and most of the great playwrights did write for a company. Shakespeare, the Globe. Moliere had his own actors. And a lot of the great playwrights also were actors, too. I think that's a part of my puzzle that maybe is missing. I've only acted twice in my life. I was in the varsity show I wrote at Columbia, and that was just a spoof. I was playing a spoof of a famous bullfighter who was having a famous affair with Ava Gardner at the time. Jean-Louis Miguel Dominguez, no one knows who he is anymore. But then he came out in a bullfighter's outfit with shoe polish in your hair. That's who you were satirizing. And that was just fun. And then at Actor Studio, one of the days, one of the playwrights and directors said, "You'd be perfect for this part." And I said, "I'm not an actor." He said, "You'd be perfect." And how can you be nervous? You know everybody at the studio. We're not asking you to do it on Broadway or off Broadway. At the Playwright Unit will perform the play, and I knew everybody. I said, "All right." She was not famous then. I played Jane Fonda's younger brother. And the day I woke up, we were going to do the play, I was like, my body was quivering. When we got there, you could see my knees, literally shaking through my pants. I literally threw up before I went on, and when I spoke, there was a tremolo, like late Katharine Hepburn, that Remy in your why. And I thought, this is acting. Never, never, never again. And I didn't even want to do it. I mean, they really talked me into it, and I thought it'd be fun, and I'd learn something from it about playwriting, and I didn't. Because someone said, if you're an actor, actors think moment to moment, and the really great playwrights think moment to moment. And it all sounds good in theory, but I was so terrified, I learned nothing that day, except I never want to do this ever, ever again. And I haven't. And I'm not too bad about public speaking, better than I used to be. Like the other night, it's hard to enjoy your dinner knowing, I wish they did all that stuff before the dinner. And then at least eat your dinner because you're looking down at your notes, pretending you're talking to the person next to you and enjoying your cod or your chicken, and really you're looking at your notes. But it was at one of those tributes, I think of 2 times when I got the idea for a play. The Manhattan Theater Club did a tribute to me. And Zoe came out and did a speech from A Perfect Ganesh, which she'd been in. And a little later, Nathan came out and did one of Bendy's speeches about Collis in Lisbon Traviata. And I did a master class for Zoe. And the first line of the play is "no applause." And the last line is "that's that." And that's all I knew. And it's in my archive, the program, and it says, "Master class, no applause," and an arrow, the end. And not the end, that's that. And that play, I had to fill in from "no applause" to that 2.5 hours later, but it just came and that's the part I wanted to write for. So when she turned it down, I was pretty devastated. And I think Robert maybe talked to her into doing it. I don't know, who knows. I remember that actors turn plays down and change their mind if actors agree to do plays. And then I've been rereading it. I don't think so. Third curtain goes up when the curtain goes up, and that's why my parents always used to say, "Do you have a show happening?" And so many times there were disappointments. So I learned nothing definite. I couldn't tell you. What about that show you said you were writing? So it's easier just to keep than say you were invited to attend May 11th, and it's still May 10th. Somebody can get hit by a bus, and it doesn't happen. But I think the less you inform people, but I'm surprised. I said I think I did as much about Fire and Air simply because I was actually doing a rewrite when you showed up, and it's like I'm thinking about it right now, and I've got to be sharing it with the world pretty soon. And now it's also very different. I can write a play, hit send on the computer. It's in London. A second later, remember studio duplicating? They type our scripts out on a stencil, and you get like 12 copies, and they got fainter and fainter, and they're all numbered. And you better send Geraldine Page script 1. And if she got script 2, she was already in a bad mood. And now, how many copies are you on? And then when you go to pick up your script, it usually took about 5 days to type up the stencil and go, McNally, and you're hoping that they're going to say, "Did you write this? Oh my God, it's great." Nothing. They're like $85. You just, come on, say something. Nothing. $85. And it was like, oh. Every playwright had this, of my generation had that story of picking up our scripts at studio duplicating. Because everybody back there typing were actors. And they were saying, "Oh, we've read this new play. It's really great," or "It's really a turkey." They were like our first critics.
Where do you see off-Broadway going and off-Broadway?
Off-Broadway's in Brooklyn now. I mean, this young man who was sitting here, who's my assistant, they find spaces. Their biggest problem, he said, is the amount of rent. Even to use a room suitable for inviting an audience and performing a play for well under 100 people. Some people will ask $2,000 just for 2 days, and they don't. So they find a place that's maybe $200 or $300, and they chip in. But there are as many young playwrights out there as there were when I started. But Manhattan is not where they're happening. They're going to Brooklyn, and I'm sure the Bronx and Queens, Staten Island. But I have not heard about new work being done on Staten Island yet. I just think people like to get together, and there's enough people who like to act, and there's enough people who like to tell stories through dialogue, and who don't want to describe what you're wearing. And they want to see how you move, behave, speak. And I just was I think most playwrights don't write good descriptions of the room, or in theater you don't get to write, he was thinking, da-da-da-da. You got to write a scene where the actor is forced to think about his dead mother, even though he's ordering a can of tuna fish. So it's such a different, and I think you're attracted to what brings out your strong suit. And even when I was a journalist, I liked interviews more than straight news stories, trying to capture what people sounded like. I remember early in the summers I worked at a professional newspaper in Corpus Christi, not a bad paper, called the Corpus Christi Caller Times, and they asked me to interview Lyndon Johnson, who was a senator then. And while I was interviewing him about the oil depletion tax, of which I knew nothing and cared even less, the phone rang and they said, "It's Mrs. Johnson." So he's talking, in just a minute, I'm sitting where you are, gets on the phone, "Yeah, Bird." And he starts flipping through this month's Playboy. "Yeah, Bird, yeah, uh-huh." He looks at Miss January. "Yeah, well, tell Lucy she can't." It was a real mom and pop call. "Okay, so you're saying, young man, about the oil senator." So in the interview I mentioned during the phone call, Mrs. Johnson called, during which the senator was flipping through this month's Playboy, and the editor didn't say anything. We ran the story. And he got a call from Senator Johnson's office. Who was that young? You sent this child to interview the senator and did this to him. And I thought that's what made the story interesting to me. Like millions of men, he was talking to his wife and looking at Playboy, and I thought that was much more interesting than the oil depletion tax. So I think I was destined to be and also playwrights, we're in such control of what people say. Writers are probably the most controlling people in the world. The script of Hamlet is what William Shakespeare wrote. Now, you can't rewrite it, You can try to get an actor to perform it a certain way, but Hamlet's going to die every performance. He doesn't get out of that one. So